Hi, I'm Tess,
And I'm Sarah.
and this is the Basically Bookish podcast.
Today we're discussing The Cruel Prince by Holly Black and giving our honest opinions on the first book in this young adult series.
As always, we'll start off with a spoiler free review. So if you haven't finished the book or you're just curious whether it's worth the hype, you're safe for the first part. Then we'll let you know before we slide into the second half with all of the spoilers and details.
The Cruel Prince is the first book in the young adult book series named The Folk of the Air by Holly Black. This is a story that's full of political scheming, malicious fairies, dark magic, and is centered around Jude Dorte, who is a human and a fiery young female character.
If you're new here, welcome. Hit follow, leave a review, and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening. All right, let's get into it.
All right, let's start with our star ratings. How many stars would you give this book and why?
So, for me personally, I think I would give this book, I'm going to say 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed reading it. I thought that the world building was pretty seamless. I really enjoy how we are just kind of plopped into the action of the story and the pace never really lets up. I found the fairies to be really cool. It's definitely a departure from Sarah J. Maas where the fairies aren't just like super hot humans. There are a lot of kind of creepy, strange fairies. A lot of them look humanoid, but not quite. And overall, I really enjoyed the book. I went into it knowing that it's not really a romantasy and that the romantic side plot is a very, very small part of the whole book. So I wasn't missing that. So I think that I was able to give it a higher star rating. What about you?
Yeah, I found it to be a little hard to get started in the beginning. I didn't really enjoy the story so much. And then as it got going, especially towards the end of the book, I really started to like it. And I could see that it's one of those books that is just the beginning of the series. And so it's just setting the background for probably the second and third book, which are a little bit more interesting. And so I'm giving it a 4. I think that I'm happy to be back in fantasy, but it wasn't my favorite book.
That's fair. I also wonder if we have kind of a different feeling between it because I have finished the series and you just
Yes.
finished the first book. So I wonder if that probably has to influence my opinion
Yeah.
on it as well, you know?
Yeah, I could see it really picking up at the end, and I really wanted to go to the next book. And so, yeah, this one just kind of started out like background for me.
That's fair. Okay. There's also some family dynamics that get explored, which I find really fun, like Jude and her twin sister. I think that they work as really good foils for each other and how these humans are surviving in Faerie. And I thought that that was interesting too.
Yeah. So I think in the beginning, the prologue, I wrote in my notes, I put it's giving Bible tales. For me, a lot of the words that they used and the turn of phrase reminded me a lot of the Old Testament. Things like Maddox saying to Jude, "You will obey me in this and all things," is definitely something you hear around the church. Also, just the name Jude. It reminded me of the apocalypse, the black horse that Maddox rides up on when they first comes to the house, and her mother running out claiming to renounce her vows. Yeah, that's probably as much as I can say without getting into spoilers. But yeah, I
Yeah.
just kind of, it was definitely right off the bat giving that feel for me. I looked into, and there was nothing about the author being religious, but I wonder.
Yeah, I wonder as well, or maybe at least growing up with a religious background.
Right.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and start talking spoilers. If you haven't read this book and you don't want any spoilers, this is where we leave you and we'll see you in the next one. Okay, so is there anything else that you want to elaborate more on it kind of relating to the Bible for you since we're still kind of on that?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't want to give anything away, but definitely Balekin, he's the bad guy. I don't know how to say that, but the Baal names, the Balal names, these are going to be, at least in the Bible, are representative of the devil. And so I imagine that Balekin's going to be a bad guy. But that's just my first impression.
Yeah, and do you think that those like religious subtexts, do you think that those made you like the book more or less?
I think personally it made me like the book more. It made me like look more into it. It gives a more severe quality to the book because I did find there's a youthful sweetness to the book, a cozy motif that I have a particular fondness for. Things like the name Tatterfell and the image of smearing fairy ointment on her eyes to give her true sight. There's something so visceral and sweet about that. The way Jude styles her hair into horns, the vibe is romantic witchcraft, and everything feels very alive in Faerie.
Yeah, I really liked that as well. I felt like it had a very old school fairy tale vibe to it.
One thing I did want to say that I wondered what our listeners thought was I love young adult fiction because I feel like it challenges my vocabulary in ways that adult fiction can become sort of in a way lazy, or is it that I am being lazy in what I'm reading? I'd love to hear what our listeners thought. Are young adult fiction books more challenging with vocabulary in your opinion, pushing the envelope more than modern adult novels? What do you think?
I think it just depends. Like if you're talking romantasy or like a fantasy versus like a contemporary romance where there's like a lot of slang and a lot of pop culture references to things that are happening right now versus a book that's using more like old style prose. I
Yeah.
think in general it's going to be a little bit more challenging just because it's not language that we use every single day. But
And
that's
so
just kind
you
of what I think.
Yeah, and so that's a great way to frame it. And so you think that it's more like the genre of fantasy is going to challenge us more than modern
I
novels
think
of
so. When
normal
it
day.
comes to
Yeah,
vocabulary, anyway.
right. Because we're not bequeathing things, on
Right.
Saturday.
No.
One thing I loved is I love to picture the fairy towns alongside and below the towns. That was just like a really interesting image that I thought about, and the author's imagination is commendable.
Right. I really like the thought of these kind of rogue fairies who decide not to live in fairy and just kind of pay for things by changing fall leaves into dollar bills and things like that. Or like, stealing and pickpocketing and skimming the froth off of the milk. That sort of stuff feels very reminiscent of classic old fairy tales, which took me back to my childhood and I absolutely adored.
Yeah, I love that. I have the same imagery in my head. I'm thinking like vines and you can almost see and smell the magic around you and it's just very alive.
Right. So while we were reading this, I did make notes about major plot points. So I wanted to give an abridged, desperate attempt to explain everything that happens in Cruel Prince. Is there something that you want to touch on before we get into that? Or should I just kind of go by plot points and if it brings something up, we'll just talk about it?
That sounds good.
Okay, so the book opens. Jude, her twin sister, and her half sister are living in the human world with their mother and their father slash stepfather. When Maddox, who is Jude's half sister Vivi's biological father, comes knocking at the door. Maddox is an ogre and a redcap, meaning he is bloodthirsty. He is like a little war goblin. All he knows is war, all he wants is power, and he comes to claim his girls. So it's pretty messy, it's pretty bloody. We start off with fish sticks, and all of a sudden the girls are spirited away to the fairy realm, leaving behind their now deceased parents.
Yeah, it was a really brutal opening. The book is so good in the innocence that's just sitting there in the open. And then all of a sudden, something comes in, and the parents' response to Maddox is so overwhelming. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit with the narrative at all. And then you realize why.
Right. It also sets up for a very fraught relationship between Maddox, who, even though Jude and her twin sister Taryn aren't biologically his, because his wife had this offspring, he's taken upon himself to raise them as though they're his own. So the family dynamics, we have a father who is tough and takes care of his girls, while always looks out for them to the best of his abilities. But at the end of the day, he killed their parents.
Yeah, I think he refers to Jude and Taryn as his wife's progeny and therefore my responsibility.
Exactly.
You really have to question the motives of Maddox. He's appearing to be a steadfast father figure, but literally takes away their mother. And so
Right.
he's a conflicted character for sure.
Yeah. And as time goes on, though, he actually finds himself relating the most to Jude, I feel, because Jude is the most like him, where Taryn sort of takes after their stepmother, Oriana. She's more diplomatic. She wants to play the game in the sense that she wants to marry into society. there's pretty much two ways that humans can earn their place in Elfhame, and that's either marrying into it or fighting, right? Essentially becoming like knights, earning their
Becoming like so, yeah, right. Becoming so indispensable in your craft that you become like a master of that craft and therefore part of their group.
right, because in this world, humans are also treated as lesser than. A lot of the times they're magicked into being essentially slaves for the fairies. But getting back to my point, Taryn wants to marry into the world. Vivi, who is Maddox's biological heir, is very rebellious, very upset. She doesn't really want anything to do with Elfham. She would rather live in the human realm. Jude wants to be a knight, or she wants to be in the guard. Jude has always been into swordplay and learning about battle strategy, and so her and Maddox kind of have the closest bond. I think Maddox sees the most of himself in Jude out of all three of his girls.
Yeah, which is really interesting because Vivi, the oldest girl, is actually also fairy. So she's also Fae. So I don't know if we had gone over that part yet, but Taryn and Jude are human and then Vivi's Fae. And so she actually fits in the most there and is the most rebellious and least likely to want to be part of the group.
Which also I think makes sense and is like a bit of a commentary on like societal structures. Vivi is the one who fits in the most, and thus she has the most room to rebel. Whereas if Jude or Taryn did, they're a lot more dispendable than Vivi.
Right. And fairy is not kind to humans.
No,
Lots of humans die there.
pretty brutal. So, as they're growing up, Jude and Taryn go to school with the nobility of Elfham, again, because Maddox is the head of the royal guard. So, they're going to school with all of the nobility, but they're bullied pretty heavily by Prince Cardan and his friends. His friends are named Locke, Valerian, and Nicasia. And the first time I read this book, I was like, wow, things are escalating really quickly because I got the impression that they had been kind of steadily bullied by them for years, and then one day Jude had just had enough. But it seems like all of this started at the, like, this kind of back and forth between this group started at the beginning of Cruel Prince.
Right. Yeah. This school year or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So, after competing in a tournament where people are picked to become royal guards and knights, Jude is actually offered the opportunity to become a spy for Prince Dane. And the reason why he wants her to spy is one, she's a human, so a lot of times they're kind of disregarded and they can move about more or less unseen. And two, in this world, the fairies can't lie, but humans can.
I love that aspect of it. And I love how some of the fairies are distrustful of everything that humans say. And some of the fairies actually see this as a strength and something that they can use. It's really interesting and probably how it would be if you knew that there was a group of people that couldn't lie.
Right. Yeah. See, for me, I feel like the story started picking up here because it was like, oh, a little bit of espionage. Here we go.
Yeah, yeah. I love the way that Jude is always wriggling out of things and coming up with plans. That's
She's a
one of
big
my
schemer.
right. And it took me a while to realize that she was doing that. I was like, girl's not making good decisions. And then I realized that some of the stuff she was setting up, and I thought, wow, that's really, that's great. Yeah. But I do think it took a little while for me to figure it out.
So Jude returns home at one point and she finds Locke, who is one of Cardan's friends, playing with her little brother Oak in the yard. And he's been kind of kind to Jude, and tension seems to be growing with him asking if he can see her again. They're getting a little bit close, but then twin sister Taryn pops out and is like, what's going on? Time for dinner. And so the two of them sort of disperse. And my little pointers were going up. It's like, something's off here. What's happening?
Yeah. He is a really sketchy character. You
Awful
can't really get a read
character.
on him. Yeah.
We pretty quickly find out that Locke is weird and awful and evil, and he's also promising to marry Jude's twin sister Taryn and telling her sister that it's pretty much a test to see how far she'll let him go to play with Jude's emotions.
Big nope.
Big nope indeed. And we find out from Cardan that he thinks that Locke, at the end of the day, wanted to end up with both human twin sisters. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. I wonder if that's a thing in Fae, just taking on multiple human wives.
Jude falls asleep at her desk, and Valerian tries to glamour her in order for her to unalive herself. But when she accepted to be Dane's spy, in exchange for her services to him, he granted her a geese, that's how I'm pronouncing it. I don't know how you did. Geese?
Yeah, I think I went with more French kind of a gee noise,
Okay.
but yeah,
But
I didn't even
essentially,
think about it. Yeah,
But essentially, it's a charm so that she can't be compelled to do other things. Even if she's not wearing her little rowan berries or her charms that she has, she can't be compelled by fairies, which is a really big advantage for a human girl living in fairy.
right. But she knows that it's definitely, she's smart enough to realize that the Fae work in this very twisted way that's never straightforward. And so she's smart enough to realize there's something twisted about the way that this has been given to her.
Right. But I think that Dane also tells her that he can still compel her to do things. It's just
Right.
not anybody.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, I love how tricky
Yeah.
the fairies are in this series.
Yes.
But so he tries to glamour her so she will no longer exist. And instead of that happening, she actually ends up stabbing him, and now he no longer exists. And I'm pretty sure she buries him in like Maddox's like stable yard. So
Right. That was a really intense part of the book.
yeah.
I did not see that coming, especially because Maddox has made a point up until this point of telling Jude, you are not a killer. And so
Right.
you don't have what it takes. And so when she brutally murders someone and stuffs them under her bed, that's like more killer than I've seen in a while.
Right. Our girl has some cojones.
Put that one under not smart decisions.
Lock that one under Jude is a bit reckless. Okay, so at some point, Carden ends up telling her that she deserves Locke, that they deserve each other, which has me very, very worried.
Right.
Next, there's a party at Locke's manor, and Jude wakes up next to him in bed. It seems that she's definitely aware of Carden, who had been watching her the entire night of the party. And these fairies can party. They like to have a lot of physical intimacy. There's a lot of smeared golden glitter and eyeliner. It's very like goth, very hot, very goth.
Yeah.
In
There's
my
just a lot
opinion.
of smearing things. There's just smearing, lots of it in general. It paints a real rich picture, you know?
It does. So there ends up being a golden acorn in the pocket of Locke's mother's dress that Jude had borrowed. And we just know that that's going to mean something later. Jude ends up keeping the acorn.
Right. There's all these little trinkets and little things that are discussed all throughout the book. And it's very clear that little things that can be given to you can protect you, and like the rowan berries and things like that. And so we know that'll be important.
And sure enough, the acorn holds a little note. So it's from Locke's mother to a friend, presumably, and she's asking for protection for him from the court. We're not quite sure what this means at this time. But it turns out that Dane is really evil, and he actually had his pregnant lover killed to avoid his dad finding out that he was hooking up with his dad's lover. So I might have lost you. Dane is the prince. He's also one of Carden's brothers. We've got Prince Carden, we've got Prince Dane. They also have a few sisters, and Baelkin is another brother. Okay, siblings, king,
Carden.
right? The king had a consort, and his son, Dane, was hooking up with the consort and got her pregnant. Dane is the next in line to the throne, and he didn't want to get dad upset that he had hooked up with the consort, so he has the consort unalive.
Yes.
Okay?
Yuck and rude.
Very, very yuck and very, very rude. But good news for us, it turns out that the child isn't actually dead. The child is Baby Oak. Baby Oak, Jude's stepbrother from
Yes,
Maddox and
that's right.
Oriana. Because Oriana was also a consort. She knew the king slash Dane's lover, they were friends, and the acorn was for her. She found the king slash Dane's consort as she was leaving this world and pregnant, and she ended up saving Baby Oak in a very bloody and brutal way. But that means that Baby Oak has claim to the throne because in this world, they have a blood crown, and the crown can only be passed down through the specific bloodline. It will not sit on someone else's head. And not only that, someone else from that bloodline has to put that crown on the successor's head. So
Yeah.
baby Oak has a claim to the throne. Let's keep that in the back of our minds, right?
Yes.
The
I love
twists, the turns.
I love the imagery of the humble acorn becoming the mighty oak. And I think at this point, I think this is when it happens. Jude does something that I haven't seen. I love when Jude breaks the fourth wall and talks to us directly, because I think it's at this point that she explains what's being left out of the story and what she hasn't told the reader. And I love that little break. I think it happens a couple times through the book where she just directly talks to the reader. I think that it's fun, and it gives a little interesting tidbit that kind of tells you that we're being told a story, not just living through a story, but we're being told.
Love it. I love it too. Okay, so we have the twists, we have the turns, we have the betrayals going on. Turns out Dane's not such a good guy. Right.
Yeah.
So at the coronation, Baelkin, remember at the beginning of the episode, and Sarah told us that we knew he was going to be evil? At the coronation, Baelkin, Cardan's brother, makes a move for the crown, and he's backed up by Matic. So we have chaos, it's pandemonium. Pretty much the entire pretty much the entire royal family is taken out in a series of unfortunate events, essentially. And everybody's gone except for Baelkin. Dane is now out of the picture. He's gone. So I guess we're not a spy anymore. But Dane's out of the picture, the sisters are gone, the king is gone, and Cardan is off somewhere drunk. No one knows where he is. And Baelkin is pretty much demanding that the crown be put on his head, but there's nobody to put the crown on his head.
Right. That happens when you kill your whole family.
That does. There's nobody left to crown you.
Yeah, the whole time I was looking at that Baelkin guy. What's with that guy?
This is definitely abridged. If you'd like a fuller plot breakdown, let us know, because there's definitely a bunch of little side things that are happening. Jude's meeting the Court of Shadows, and she's getting some spy buddies that will come into play later on in the series that are really cool. But yeah, just very abridged.
Yeah, so, it's a book heavy in political intrigue, and you get to watch this character build these webs and weave all of these things into her future. And again, like I said, I was a little slow on the uptake, but as soon as we got to the end, I realized that Jude had actually been basically a master puppeteer of all of these people. I'll let you continue.
Right. Yes. So Jude finds Cardan, or actually he finds her, and she comes up with a scheme to put baby Oak on the throne. And instead of letting Oak rule directly, because she knows that Daddy Matic is going to be all about shaping Oak in his own image, which again, he's a redcap, so he is a blood-hungry ogre. That is his nature, his core being. He wants war, he wants bloodshed. That's his life's blood. So instead of letting Oak rule, her plan is that she's going to spirit Oak away to the human realm so he can kind of ripen, kind of mature, grow into the mighty oak from the acorn, like you so eloquently said. And in the meantime, I don't really know what her plan is in the meantime. She doesn't want Oak to be corrupted by Matic.
And also, I think there's going to be a lot of fallout from what just happened. All of these people have been killed. And so I think they're trying to I'm hoping that Jude's trying to build a more responsible world. And then therefore Oak can come to that, what she's trying to build and lead it.
Right.
But we don't know.
Yeah. And so Oak won't grow up in this super cruel, cutthroat sort of environment.
Which, by the way, he definitely would have. He would have been just like his half brothers, essentially.
Absolutely. But Jude convinces Cardan to be under her control for a year and a day. I forget exactly which bargain they make, but a lot of this novel is Jude just kind of bossing Cardan around.
Yeah, I like that dynamic in the way it isn't enemies to lovers, but more like enemies to reluctant.
Hostage.
Yeah, hostage. That's good. Yeah, I was going to say reluctant friends, but yeah, hostage is probably more representative.
Enemies to hostage to reluctant allies.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of they're reluctant to be friends.
But then at the end, when Jude has everything set up and she's got this perfect moment to have Cardan crown Oak, she pulls a little switcheroo and has Oak crown Cardan.
And what do you think she has planned?
I think that it's hard to say how I felt at the end of this book. I was just so excited because to me, it was the twists, the turns, what's happening next. But I think that obviously because she has Cardan under her control, I think that she just thinks she's got a year to figure it out, and let's get Oak out of here. He's not going to be in control or power. She can roll vicariously through Carden. And if there's like one thing that I know about my girl Jude Duarte, is she wants power.
Yes,
She
she
wants
does.
power. So I think that at the end of the day, she's like, Oak can't be king right now. It's too complicated. Carden doesn't want to be king, so it'll be easy to get him to step down when the time is right. And I have a year to figure out my next step. I'm a smart girl. Look how far I've come. I got this.
Yeah, yeah, I have so many questions. The second question I wanted to ask you was, do you think, I mean, I know she had always planned to keep Oak away, but do you think that she planned to crown Carden the whole time?
I don't know. It's hard to tell if she didn't let us in, like us, the reader, if she didn't let us in
Right.
on her ultimate plan, or if she kind of changed her mind towards the end there and decided to pull that. But I think that as she was getting like more and more of this taste for power, I think it became more and more appealing to her. And I think in the
Yeah,
end, I think she thinks she's making the right decision for everybody involved. But I do think that she is also very motivated by this like drive for control and power.
right, right. Yeah, and I like what you said because we do touch on the fact that we know that we're being told this story by Jude. And so there are things that she can leave out. And so she's definitely like crafting it either to make her look good or to make it, look a certain way. And what do you think will happen with Taryn? Well, I guess you already know, but
Right. Yeah, I can't really.
I
I
know.
can't wait for you to finish the series because I think it's like such a. It's only 3 books and it's
Yeah.
such like a nice little story. The last book, not the novellas, but the last book, The Queen of Nothing, has kind of mixed reviews. And I'm not gonna like spoil it, but I really like that one because I'm a fan of the snake. Let me know in the comments what you think, but that's all I can say.
Snake. I feel like I know about a roach, a bomb, but I don't know about a snake, I don't think so.
I can't tell you anymore.
All right. I'll have to
It takes such a left turn, and you're like, what?
yes.
Yeah, but it's really fun. I really like this series. I had a blast with it. I feel like I ate this series up.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. There are so many good series, and the first book is the price of admission, as we've said. And so this did feel like the admission price, and just getting through this first iteration of Jude and just seeing what she has set up for the future definitely makes the next books interesting.
Right. Yeah. I enjoyed it overall. I love the kind of dark fairy tale aspects to it, and I thought it dealt with some more adult themes, like when we get into was her name Sophie?
Yes, I was going to say I only had two more things left in my notes. And when she said, let's go to the cliff side after Sophie, the servant, was disassociating about Faerie being real, I was breathless through those pages. It was so hard not to jump ahead for me. I was reading it so fast, like, oh no, that's a terrible idea. Do
Right.
not take her to the cliffside. And also, this is the book where they strut through the JC Penney like they're the hottest things around. And I did like when they first were leaving the human world and going to Faerie, and just that new lease on life that they felt in that moment was just very fun. And I thought a great backstory. It gave a lot of life to those characters.
Right. Yeah, I think that's like you said earlier, it's such like a sweet juxtaposition
Yeah.
where it's almost like if you just turn around the right corner, if you just look at the right thing at the right time, you might just see a little bit of magic, It just exists just right next door. And I
Yeah.
think it's really cool.
And I so hopelessly love that kind of thing. And so it's just, it was a beautiful book, I thought.
Yeah. Loved it. Thanks for joining us today. Have you read The Cruel Prince? What are your thoughts on the novel?
And before you go, let us know what you're currently reading and if you think we should check it out. We'd love for our comment section to be a space where we can recommend books to each other. If someone who is listening to this episode liked Cruel Prince, what book would you suggest to them next?
If you made it all the way to the end of this episode, leave us a magic or fairy themed emoji in the YouTube comments so we know that you're one of the real ones.
And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, take a second to leave a rating or review. It helps other readers find the pod and means the world to us.
Subscribe for more bookish breakdowns, and don't forget to follow us on all the socials at Basically Bookish Pod.
Until next time,
Happy reading!
happy reading.